is that what we want as a Science Granting Council? We know that sometimes when we're conducting research concerning human health, there are ethical issues that we need to respect as scientists. What are we going to say as Africans in terms of guiding rules on ethics? What are the infrastructure that is required to power our data management processes? We need to think about high performance computing. We need to think about setting up cloud computing, broadband networks, trusted data centers. I just gave you an example of a trusted data center in Africa, at Data First in South Africa. As far as the global standards are concerned, that is the sort of standard we want to attain in Africa if we want to participate in the global open science space. What sort of machine learning and analytical tools do we need to define our data, to analyze our data? What sort of society portals do we need to set up as a Science Granting Council? If we have to look at good practices, what are the data management principles that we are going to be looking at? Our data must be attuned to FAIR. And what does FAIR mean? FAIR means that the data must be findable, the data must be accessible, the data must be interoperable, and the data must be reusable. But data in and of itself cannot be found if you don't develop metadata, if you don't develop the software that will enable others to find your data and use your data. Your data must have codes. If you are going to release your data, you must be able to release your codes, you must be able to release your workflows, you must be able to release the tools that are needed. And also, scientists must be able to use other tools and cues to find the data that you've made available in trusted depositories. This is what happened to Africa when it was confronted with a challenge, health challenge, and it had to mobilize the international community to come and solve that challenge. This was a very complex issue that Africa faced in terms of the Ebola disease. Look how many multinationals, how many government entities came to help solve the problem. All these entities are bringing their knowledge sets, they are bringing their skills to the challenge to solve the problem for Africa. And Africans were participants in this challenge. Look what happened after the project, after the challenge was resolved. All the data flew away because data could not be, Africa does not have the repositories. They don't have the capacity to retain the data. Right now, if this epidemic was to break out again, Africa is going to start running helter-skelter because the data they need to learn from is not available. Right now, this data is sitting in Australia, is sitting in Asia, probably Japan, in Europe. Likely we have Geoffrey here. So some of their data is sitting in Europe. Some of their data is sitting in the United States. Some of this data is sitting in Canada. But this is what Africa needs to begin to learn to manage. I'm going to talk about you managing the data and making that data available through publication. You need to communicate that data. There's no point in creating wonderful data and then it sits in a silo in one place or in one part of Africa when the other part of Africa is needing the same data. How do we develop open communication and how do we engage the citizens to participate? Again, we're looking at principles, we're looking at purposes and infrastructures and practices that underlie communication and engagement. And one of them is that we need to share scientific results with with all at affordable costs. Eunice shared a very common example that we scientists go through, that you make a publication, and when you want to go back to that publication, because you will have utilized your free prints, you find a paywall. Many times I've been frustrated. I'm trying to illustrate a piece of research I did in bilingual education, and I want to access my work. I can't find it because it's paywalled. So open science must provide an opportunity when African scientists should be able to communicate their findings without hindrance to all Africans. And that's what the opportunity open science is trying to bring about. We need to jointly create actionable knowledge with all societal stakeholders. We need to make sure that we beat what is called post-truth. And I think, Geoffrey, you talked about how the internet has been used to spread lies. 2 weeks ago, I was frustrated because when I went on the social media, one of the phenomena that is hitting Africa is these, onset of what are called prophets. The prophets. And a prophet would broadcast on a social media a prediction about a country. That country is not going to succeed. And you look at this guy is just... And I said to myself, where is the science? Because the science needs to start countering such falsehood. But the propensity of technology is that it's going to enable falsehood to be sprayed on the open infrastructure systems if science does not come at the defense of these hearings. We're going to look at, thank you. We're going to look at the principles that will govern knowledge, and the knowledge needs to be accessible and comprehensible to all wishing it. Scientists must publish evidence in the fullest way for any published claim. And this is what we are trying to say to all the scientists in Africa. I'm going to look at the open science practices, and what I'm going to do in this very next slide very quickly is to just give you case examples of some of the anecdotal evidence of open science practices in Africa. And one of them is Ethiopia, that launched their open data, open access policy, where all the universities in Ethiopia are going to enable open access to all the research that is funded by the public to be freely available to all. Tanzania has got initiatives on open science, and they are also working with the D-Lab, and that is an initiative to look at that is promoting open science. South Africa has got an open science policy, and also it's very big in terms of research data management. The SK, the Square Kilometre Array, is one of the opportunities that's going to power open science. Botswana launched its Open Data, Open Science Forum that allows interaction between government and stakeholders in promoting open science. Senegal is part of a node of the Human Heritage and Health Bioinformatics Network. Zambia is a member of Plan S, and one of the things about Zambia is that it is the only country that has signed up on Plan S. And Plan S, I think one of these presenters here today talked about how they want to accelerate publication and availability of publicly funded research to all. And Zambia is one of those countries, not one of the only country, but it's the only country in Africa that has signed up to Plan S. Burkina Faso has a wonderful initiative where it allows its public government data to be freely available, so you can interact with government data in Burkina Faso without going through any difficulties. And what that does is that it enables the citizens to begin to have trust in their own government, because their own government have nothing to hide. I think you're going to realize that one of the difficulties about statistics in Africa is that they're very difficult to access because they're in the statistical offices of government. It's difficult to access, and Burkina Faso is a very good example. Another example that we looked at in Burkina Faso is that there's a private firm called Agridet. Agridet, BF, has developed this initiative where they are able to distribute their data with the farmers. The farmers need data on climate. Farmers need data on soil, a type of the soil, and crop yield. And in Burkina Faso, this initiative is able to disseminate information to the farmers, and the farmers are able to use that, that information. Why is this case very important for science granting councils? Science granting councils can learn a lot from this initiative because the initiative does not only use French to disseminate information, but it uses 4 local languages in Burkina Faso. It's a beautiful way to communicate science in simpler terms to those that have never been to school, but they are able to use the science. The global open data on agriculture and nutrition is also a very interesting initiative on open science into agriculture in West Africa. Egypt has launched what is called the Egyptian Knowledge Book. What Egypt has done is to remove all the paywall inhibitions to all the knowledge that is developed in the world, and all the over 93 million Egyptians can access research through their libraries without any problems. Kenya and JKUAT, one of the authors of this paper, is in Botswana as we speak, but they are also launching initiatives in open science and open data, and the Open Data for Development also just did some work in Kenya. All these things are leading to the African Open Science Platform, which just concluded, but it did groundbreaking work into open science. What is the potential outcome of this? The potential outcome is likely to be an open African open science area, which the science granting councils may think about. The current international publishing model does not favor Africa. And the current international publishing model, current publishing model is not going to favor open access, open science. Africa's world knowledge contribution at the moment is 0.74%, but ironically, even Africans cannot access much of that little contribution. The Directory of Open Access Journals has listed 15 countries in Africa that have contributed journals to the directory, and the numbers are not exciting at all. The African Journal of Open Access Online has 524 journals. Out of that, 262 journals are open access. Why is this important? The science granting councils must be going to a position where all the journals are supposed to be open access. What I'm trying to highlight here is the fact that there could be thousands of those journals, but the journals we are looking at are peer-reviewed journals, good quality African journals that have been indexed. Kenya and South Africa are the only countries spending 0.8% on science. One of the things that we need to do as Africans is to fund our science. The African Union, the threshold for the African Union scientific funding is 1%, but only 2 countries are close to 1%. Open Access Science Granting Council Initiative members, open access is going to open a floodgate of knowledge. You will not contain the knowledge. But Africa can prepare to manage open science. So if we don't manage open science, the world is going to manage Africa on open science. Africa must develop publishing infrastructure and initiative. There are models to look at. America, for example, in South America is a wonderful model to look at. One of the reasons that Plan S has been resisted by Africa is that probably Africa wants to have its own homegrown initiative. America in South America is a wonderful initiative that was developed by South American countries and also by private sector. What does an efficient ecology look like? What I'm going to share with you very briefly is a project on human heredity and health bioinformatics network. This network is providing bioinformatics infrastructure support for the H3 Africa Consortium. It aims to implement Pan-African informatics infrastructure. It also coordinates data. It also enables innovative translation of research and address outreach, development and sustainability. This is a model that Africa could look at. Okay, what are the things that are going to be looked at in the infrastructure that we're talking about, in the ecology of data management? One, we need to look at databases, bioinformatics, computing infrastructure, and training. We need to provide deposition infrastructure. We need to provide tools and software. We need to provide interoperability infrastructure, standards, ontologies, and also they should make sure that they meet the FAIR principles. And also we need to link with industry. What are the lessons that we learn from an operational commons platform? One, they are extremely high-ended ICT provisional infrastructures. They also enthuse scientists by funding grand challenges to stimulate venture critical mass in exploiting the technology. Also, hubs and node systems work well in a coordinated and federated infrastructure. They are also going to stimulate collaboration through efficient shared services. What are the benefits for Africa? We're going to have collective allocation of resources, efficiency in planning and procurement. We'll build consortia, collaborations. We're also going to develop trusted repositories and also going to develop capacity building. We are going also to be a partner of choice for consortia, and we're also going to speak as one voice once we put together these federated platforms. What are the essentials? We need convergent policies and principles. We need computational capacity. We need intro-data intensive grand challenges on African priorities. We need world-class machine learning centers with priorities in leading edge science to serve functions for programs and curriculum development. This looks like an uphill battle because we are unaware of the challenges, and if you're not aware of challenges, it will look insurmountable. And if you lack leadership, it will look insurmountable. If we have inadequate science investment, it will look insurmountable. If we have poor ICT connectivity, open science will look insurmountable. If we have obsolete equipment, open science will look insurmountable. If we have scarce HPC facilities, open science will look. Remember, I said that if you collaborate, you are able to pool your resources together. But if we are operating in isolated silos, the open science will look insurmountable. If we lack training opportunities, open science, again, is going to look insurmountable. And if we lack the capacity to secure data storage, open science will look insurmountable. Sorry. I think I'm going to end here so that Geoffrey can conclude the presentation. Thank you.
So can I ask how much time we've got? 5 minutes? 2 minutes?
How much do you want me to give you?
About 10.
I give you 5, okay?
5. Okay. In that case, let's see what we've got here. Let me draw your attention to two things from the African Union Strategy for Science and Technology 2024. If you look carefully at the report, it has themes which clearly matter: disease, climate change, food security, resilience, and basically the performance of the economy. But there are some structural issues, and let me draw your attention to two of them. One of them is that Africa has few critical masses, and it has low intra-African research collaboration. Africa collaborates more with the UK than it does between African countries, which ought not to be the case, but it is. The reason why Europe is not only an economic superpower, but a research superpower, is mobility, communication, and diversity. Africa does not exploit its diversity because it has inadequate mobility, inadequate collaboration. Virtual critical masses can be created if you are effectively networked across Africa, which you aren't, but that's got to be a priority. And if you're going to get scientists to exploit technology and the potentials of technology, you've got to fund them to do it by doing the things they care about, which is their research. And a key priority ought to be funding major collaborative programs across Africa, which are mission-driven about the themes that the STI 2024 strategy identified. So let me move on to science granting councils. Science granting councils are unique in one respect. They have an intermediary position between government and the science base. They are influenced by and influence both government on the one hand and the science base on the other. And that's the position they should exploit. Our view, which we set out in the report, is that a priority for the science granting councils, if it's going to respond to the challenges it faces, which are large ones, if it's going to respond at all, then they must begin to act collectively. Now, the SCGI, the Science Granting Council, SGCI initiative, it seems to me it's a beginning of that sort of collective action, but it needs to be expanded and made greater. The case needs to be made for government of the vital role of science in economic and social development in the digital world. In utilizing and adapting this paradigm of open science to maximize efficiency, of governments need to be persuaded to endorse collective actions by the science granting councils, because without their endorsement, the science granting councils will be disabled from doing that. And our view is that it ought to think about the possibility of creating an African open science area to match and complement an African free trade area. Those two entities are based on the same things. They benefit from mobility, creativity, ideas, and diversity. They are natural partners. Announcing the intention to do something like that would hit the presses and impress people not only in Africa but worldwide. So we have some recommendations. First of all, the science granting councils should choose their level of ambition. Are they very ambitious and very bold? Do they want to try to create together as a collective an African open science area? Do they merely want to coordinate existing actions, important, complicated and difficult, but they could take that role, and someone needs to take the role of coordinator? Or could they be focused in doing two things? Working really hard to put the ICT infrastructure in that's required, because at the moment it isn't there in the scale that's required, and without it, frankly, you're dead in the water, and exploit it and develop both the virtual critical masses and the intra-African collaboration by data-intensive grand challenges based on the STI 2024 priorities. We then suggest that there are a series of detailed and careful reviews that need to take place. One of them is to take the very large number of policies and conventions that vary from African state to African state to explore the potential of having them converge into a common set of policies. Difficult but really important. Without it, you won't get the collaboration you need. Secondly, scientific publishing is dysfunctional to a degree. The International Science Council is about to start a major program looking at the worldwide implications of this dysfunction, and Africa ought to be involved there. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. The metrics and incentives for research are adapted to a paper-driven science. That world has disappeared, and the metrics are largely barriers to innovation. And cost-efficient computing, cloud and networking solutions need to be sought from experts who know what they're talking about. And you do have such experts in Africa. You should use them. The third one is consensus building, community building, if you like, with key players. Our view is that if there were an intergovernmental concordant on common policies and processes, that would be a great value. It would start to build a playing field for the whole of Africa. Secondly, we have found, certainly in the UK and more broadly in Europe, that community building through some sort of forum, a community forum, which brings all the players to the table, is a valuable thing to do. It pressures upwards to government, and it pressures also downwards towards funders. It is important to engage with funders, crucially important. Some of them are here, and a very creative way of doing it, a strategic way of doing it, is to express an African view of what priorities are, rather than disaggregating those international priorities. And we were asked to comment on governance, and we think the hub and nodes model, which actually has been used by a number of commons or platforms worldwide and work very well. The H3A Bionet that Joseph described is an example of that. And we've simply suggested a number of tiers of the way you go about governing things, which I won't go into now. But I would like to draw attention to two comments, one from one elder statesman and one from a younger person. Shakespeare has Lady Macbeth say to Macbeth that he should be bloody, bold, and resolute. Well, you shouldn't be bloody, you should be bold and resolute. And here are two statements of boldness and resolution, one from President Paul Kagame. We need to mobilize the right mindset. Africa has everything it needs, but Africans remain mentally married to the idea that nothing can get moving without external finance. That is a failure of mindset. And the beautiful one from Shoma Josie, younger and fresher than Paul Kagame. Previously from Africa, people mined the gold and the minerals, but right now the most valuable are ideas and culture. So what we suggest is that actually the view from the mountaintop is worth taking, and if you climb hard enough, then you'll get there, and it looks good, we think. So you should just do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you needed to make another round of applause, please. Huh? Okay, we have all these ideas already expressed here. We have a time for discussions and looking at them at different perspectives. And we'll do this after tea. Okay? So we have two areas. The first one, when we come back after tea, is the first perspective I told you from the Science Granting Council's perspective, right? And we have a panel discussion on that. There will be 4 people who will make that panel discussion. And then we'll have a plenary discussion as well. So if you have your ideas as well, you can be able to express them there. Then after lunch, we have another second perspective, which is from a global perspective. And we'll have also that open general discussion as well. Of course, our 2 authors will have time towards the end to take all our comments and all our interventions and make a response for about